Welcome to the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. This podcast is for you, the busy business owner or executive looking to create generational wealth. Here, we're going to show you how to do that through real estate investing, from multifamily to industrial and everything in between. You will become a real estate investing expert. And now, here's your host, Michael Holman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. I'm your host, Michael Holman. We have a great guest with us today. A little sentimental, to be honest. It's actually my father, Ken Holman, who's on the show. He's the one that started Overland Group. He has been in the real estate business for over 40 years, and I just thought I have to get him on the show. I've actually been trying to get him on the show for I don't even know how long, but I'm really excited that today is the day that you all get to listen from him. He has definitely been my biggest mentor throughout my real estate career, and to be quite honest, throughout my entire life. And there is some things that he mentions in this episode that are just golden. And I think things that probably only people with 40 plus years of experience in real estate could really understand and give. So I highly advise that you listen to this episode. I might even say you should listen to this episode twice, because the things that he says are just insightful, right? I mean, you hear a lot from a lot of different people, but people who've been in real estate for 40 years, they just think about real estate investing. They think about real estate differently than those of us that have been in there less than that, right? And if somebody who's been in real estate for 3 or 4 years versus 40 years, they talk, they think, they look at each scenario differently. And so you're getting some of that insight. Love it. Definitely check this one out. Before we get started, if you have not been on the website yet, I don't know how many times I got to tell you, but I am going to keep telling you, executivereishow.com. Check it out. We would love to get your questions. Go ahead and ask an executive question. We'll get that answered on this show. You can also subscribe to the newsletter. Get all that real estate information right in your email once a week. It's fantastic. You can also go see all the previous episodes, right? Check out the show notes, check out all the resources from those shows, right? If you're somebody you want to get in contact with, guess what? One of the questions we ask every single guest at the end of the show is, how can people contact you? And we put that right into the show notes. You can go there. You can get in touch with somebody you thought, oh man, I got to go meet this person. I have to establish a relationship, or I need to build my network. Great way to do it. Go check out the show notes. So executivereishow.com. Also, go ahead and leave us a rating and review, whether you're listening on Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever it is. We would love to get your rating and review and see how we're doing and potentially even how we can do better. So go ahead, leave us a rating. Super simple, super easy. Just click those stars button and let's go. So lastly, before we get into this episode, we have to start off with today's executive tip. And today's executive tip is that nothing great happens in a short period of time, right? Nothing great happens in a short period of time. And one of the things that I was thinking is we were going through this episode and I was recording this with Ken, right? He's been in this for 40 years and you just have to be able to give yourself some time. A lot of us get in there, right? And it's like in like 6 months, right? We're sitting there thinking, okay, if I'm not a cajillionaire in 6 months through real estate investing, I've done something wrong. I'm going to stop and I'm a complete failure. And that's not true. Regardless of what social media says, right? Real estate is the long game, right? It is a long haul and it's building it consistently over 1, 2, 10, 20, 40 years. And that is how you become really successful in real estate investing. And it's true in a lot of other aspects. It's true in your business, right? Sometimes people, they start a new business and it's like after, 3 months, they spent $10,000 and they haven't made one dime and they're thinking, I just need to give up on this. And, sometimes, yeah, that is justified, but a lot of times, and I would argue that most of the time, it's people just giving up too soon, right? They give up before they even give themselves a chance. So remember, nothing great happens in a short period of time. And with that, we are going to get right into this interview with Ken Holman. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. As always, I'm your host, Michael Holman, and today we have a very, very special guest. He'd probably be mad at me if I didn't tell him he was the most important guest that I had brought on this show, but it is, in fact, Ken Holman. He's my father. We've been doing business together for the last about 5 years almost. By way of a little introduction to Ken, Ken is actually the president, owner, and founder of Overland Group, which is a vertically integrated real estate company. It comprises of Overland Capital, Overland Management, Overland Development, and Overland Construction. He's also the president and founder of the National Association of Real Estate Advisors, or NARIA for short. That's a program that trains real estate agents how to understand commercial deals, how to analyze them, how to use the tools to analyze investments. So really cool stuff. And then lastly, but not least, he's also developed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. No wonder I have so many wrinkles on my face after that introduction. And it has been both a good and a long 5 years together. Trying to deal with the father-son relationship is pretty cool, especially when you've got a great son like you. But it's been a lot of fun over the past few years.
Oh, that's hilarious. I often joke that I am the best and worst decision that Ken ever made. So, Ken, tell us a little about yourself. I gave you an introduction, but tell us about you.
Well, I graduated in accounting years ago from BYU and got an MBA from the University of Utah. And then later on, I went to law school at the University of Idaho. I've had a pretty good career and really excited about the real estate business. Even after all these years, I think it was the right decision for me to get into the business. And I started mainly working after I got my MBA. I got invited to work for a small, fairly sophisticated financial planning company that had a real estate syndication arm. And over the course of a few years, they asked me to head up the real estate side. And since then, I've been in real estate ever since. Started my own company after I'd been with them about 5 years, and decided it was time to move out on my own because my interests and their interests were a little bit different, and I haven't regretted the move.
Awesome.
40 years later, still feel good about it. So
40 years. Well, we're going to get into that in a little bit, but one of the things that I knew I had to ask you right from the beginning, right? There's all these different companies, right? I list like 6 of them right at the beginning, 5 or 6 of them, right? Overland Construction, Overland Management, Overland Development, and on and on and on. What I want to know, and what I think a lot of people are interested in, is what was the progression of those companies, right? What did you start off doing? And what was the goal of establishing and creating all those different companies?
So initially, I started out, when I got into career, I created for this other company a real estate management arm, and was overseeing the management of about 5,000 units in 5 states. So getting my certified property manager designation and my real estate broker's license, it was kind of a natural progression for me when I opened up my own business to start in the management side. And yet I knew where I wanted to be was investing. So I began with a management company, and then I thought, this is cool. I'm going to get in the investing side of the business. And since I love land, the first deal I did was a land deal with a friend who had an industrial property. And I went out and put a contract on a parcel of industrial land borrowed $25,000 from my equity in my home. I thought, okay, this is going to be a good investment. Talked to everybody I knew. And within 90 days, I'd lost my 25 grand and my friend wouldn't give it back. And I thought, this is an interesting introduction to the business. I not only lost 25,000, I have 25,000 now on my home. I got to pay back. So it was a $50,000 mistake. And that's the first time I realized that you have to really know what you're doing when you're getting in the real estate business. But my next investment was happened to be an old apartment complex called the Avalon in downtown Salt Lake City, a 36 rundown 1940s building that was totally vacant. And I rolled up my sleeves, renovated it, filled it up. And over the course of about 20 years, eventually tore the building down and built a 12-story high-rise on it, 96 apartment units that we converted to condominiums. And it turned out to be an extremely successful experience. So I've learned a lot in the business. I've made a few mistakes, and I've had some really good winners along the way.
Awesome. So talk to me, through this progression, right? And you ran through some of the investments. When did you decide? You said you started with the management company. When did you decide to move to, say, development or construction or some of these other aspects of real estate?
Well, so I started with management then, and that involved brokerage. So those two aspects kind of go hand in hand because you need a broker's license to run a management company. And then in the early 1980s, we got to the point, and I had acquired some existing apartment complexes along the way. And then they changed in 1986, the Ronald Reagan in that area, they had the 1986 Tax Reform Act. And when that occurred, it changed the whole dynamic of the real estate investing business. So that's when I started a development company and went out, and my first development project was a little 420 unit apartment development in Layton, Utah, called Quail Cove. And so that's where I started. And I had a small partner, GE Capital, at the time.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a pretty good beginning. And then I thought, well, I'm all for controlling as much of the real estate pipeline as I can. So over the years, I thought, all right, we're doing some great projects. I don't know enough about the construction side, even though I grew up in the construction business. And so I got my general contractor's license. We started a construction company, and that construction company has been the piece of the puzzle that has been the most difficult part to get right. And I think we're, after 30 years of this, I think we're finally starting to get it where it needs to be, doing what it should be doing for us. And we're not the typical construction company. We actually operate more like a construction management company, where we do the project management, project engineering, estimating, and superintending, but we stop at that level. And we don't try to self-perform any of the scopes of work within the project. We competitively bid that out. And by doing that, it's allowed us to go into several different markets and develop different types of projects. And I love having our hand in the construction process. It's made a huge difference in who we are and what we're capable of doing, and how we protect our investors' capital too, by the way.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many different, there's like 10 things that I want to unwrap there, but I want to kind of go back to one of the questions I asked initially, which was, okay, so you've established all these different companies. It started with management, things changed with the 1986 Tax Reform Act. We had development. All of a sudden you had construction later on, it sounds like. So what was the end goal, right? What was the vision for all of these different companies? Because most people just look at it, they'll probably get a successful management company, but it kind of stops there, right? It's like, why go into something else if it's working? What was the end goal to getting all of these different businesses?
For me, it was twofold. The first aspect is I wanted to know about every aspect of the real estate business. That's why I went to law school. I didn't go to law school to become an attorney because I thought that would not be my forte, is taking orders from somebody every day and being on their timetable. So I went to law school to learn the legal side of real estate. I started a construction company because I felt like we needed to drill down on every aspect of the construction process and be able to have more control over that aspect, because a typical relationship between a developer and a general contractor is really, even if you're friends and you know each other, it's an adversarial relationship, because you've signed a contract, you expect them to perform. If they don't perform, you're holding their feet to the fire. And on the other side of that coin, if your architect or you screw up, they're going to hold your feet to the fire. And so it's really critical to know the construction side of the business. So the combination of all of that, I guess, to sum it up, it probably means I just felt like the more we controlled that vertical integration of the whole process, the better the quality projects we would have and the better we would be able to perform with our investors.
Awesome. No, I love that. And I love the idea of adding these different verticals. I mean, you see it all the time over the course of a career. And it's something that I definitely think people should look at. I mean, if you're feeling stagnant, and stagnant in the way that you've been really successful, you're still successful, but you're trying to figure out something else to do, looking for a different vertical, something that complements what you're already doing, can really be invigorating in a career, in a business, especially if you're a business owner. So I definitely recommend that. And I love hearing all that. Okay.
Yeah. And let me just add this one point. You mentioned the word complement. That's really the key, because it has to build on what you're already doing. If you're going out and launching something completely different, that's like starting a new career, and it doesn't really fit into your model. You really do need to complement what you're doing as you add these verticals to your company.
Awesome. No, I love it. And great advice. Now, a couple things through all of that, there was a couple things that you mentioned that I have to kind of drill down on. First, you mentioned being in the real estate business for 40 years, and I would love to get your take on how that landscape has changed over the 40 years.
Oh, wow. That's, you could have asked me just easy questions, but there have been some pretty profound changes in the business over those years. I have been through no less than probably 3 or 4 major recessions in the business. And each one of those, I've learned something. I look back on a career and I say it's amazing that I'm still standing when 90% of the banks that I was working with and getting loans from don't exist anymore. And so I never would have thought that the savings and loan industry would have gone down, or the banks would have changed so radically as they've changed. But that's in the course of a career, you see all of that. So yeah, I think I think the recessions have had an impact on the business, but I have grown every time we've had something happen to us. Uh, when I discovered that if we pretty much gave away the entire project, it was really difficult to control our own destiny as a company. So we've evolved to more retail investing, and would like to do more institutional investing. But now I feel like we have the ability to invest with institutions and still maintain a level of control. As I went through my career, there were times when they controlled me rather than I controlled the deal and controlled them. So I've learned a lot in that respect. It was a lot easier years ago to go find existing properties and refurbish them, make some changes, raise the rents, increase the value of the asset, and sell them off at a profit. Now there seems to be a lot more equity capital that has chased that type of investment model. And I have found that a lot of the projects that you used to could buy at a reasonable price and do that value add concept, they just don't exist these days. It's a lot more difficult to find a really good property and actually create value. So that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen. And then recently, all this craziness with the supply chain and inflation. And believe me, I've been through a couple inflationary periods during the Jimmy Carter years. I was in the process of building a new home and was grateful to be able to get a takeout loan at 13% interest. Because my construction loan turned out to be 17%.
Oh my goodness.
And so when I see interest rates at 3 and 4 and 5%, I just have to smile inside, because that's good money compared to where we were. But I am a little nervous about the 7% inflation hikes that we're getting in some of these supply chain situations. I'll give you an example of an experience that we've just had with a project. We raised 15 million in equity capital, right, to build a 240 unit apartment project in Mesa, Arizona. Loved the deal, really excited about it. Our additional construction cost was going to be about 40 million. So we were going to be into this thing 55 million. And then we start having all these supply shortages with lumber costs going up from $300 per thousand board feet to $1,700 per thousand board feet. And our construction cost exploded. It went up in $10 million. And it's like, oh my gosh, I just had a 20%, 15% increase in my overall cost, in our overall cost. Yep. And I thought, geez, how's this going to work? Well, during that same year that we experienced all this, rents went up 20%. Who's seen 20% increases in rents in 1 year? It was crazy.
Yeah.
Our value went from 70 million to over 100 million. And it's like, well, I wasn't happy with that $10 million increase in cost, but if it gets me a $30 million increase in value, I'm probably good with that. And so it's like, I'll take 10 million in extra costs if I can add 30 million any day. So it's been kind of a crazy ride here lately, but it also looks like there's opportunities in the future.
I love that you say that, because that's actually, what I'd love, right, is you just bring a different perspective. A lot of people who come on the show, they've been around for a while, right? Some up to 10, 20 years. But not many people have been in real estate for 40 years, right? And I would love, and I think all of the listeners would love to hear, Ken Holman's crystal ball, right? Like, let's take out the crystal ball for a second. We all know that this is speculation because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But based on your perspective, how do you see the next 3 to 5 years going in real estate?
Okay, so you're asking me tough questions. I like the easier questions, but
we only ask tough questions on this show, Ken.
It seems like that's the way it's rolling. But having gone through this process a few times, let me say at the outset, I have been involved fairly heavily in the stock market. I've been involved in real estate my whole career, and bar none, I still think after 40 years, real estate is absolutely unequivocally the best investment that any investor can put their money in. And there's a couple reasons for that. You safeguard your capital and your initial investment, and it provides consistent cash flow and appreciation in the value of the asset, which you have a degree of control over. So as I've seen these markets ebb and flow, I've seen times when, like the 2008 to 2012 recession that we had, they call it the Great Recession. Mm-hmm. And there were some dynamics there that shouldn't have existed. The government let lending get out of control, so anybody could go get money, and they were building real estate. Developers will build anytime they can get money. That's the nature of the beast. And so over that period of time, there were people that were building and people that were investing, and no money down and 100% financing. And that to me is an absolutely crazy model. And when I saw that happening, I refused to get into that program. I think you still have to have good, solid fundamentals on every real estate deal that you do, which means you don't over leverage a project. You're borrowing 70 to 75% of the money, but you're also putting in a fair amount of equity capital, so that if you do have these ups and downs, cycles in the real estate market, which typically happen about every 18 to 20 years, when you have those cycles, you have the ability to hunker down, weather the storm, because on the other side of that, the dynamics and the economics of the market are always going to prevail. And so we're seeing high inflation. Frankly, the Dodd-Frank Act on banking, there was a lot of negatives relative to that, but it forced everybody to be in a different model when they were investing and when they were buying real estate. They were required to have more capital invested in the project. They were required to, be more responsible in terms of their financial situation and, their credit and those kind of things. And that put us on a safer foundation. Now this COVID pandemic, it hit us and created some interesting things with like inline retail and office buildings, nobody coming into work anymore, people working from home. Some companies realized that, hey, they could do just fine working from home. I don't feel the same way in terms of our company model. I think there's a lot of synergy that happens when you're together creating something like that. But so I guess I've seen some changes in the business, but I think the fundamentals still are there. And we may be going through an inflationary cycle, and we may wind up going through some sort of a recessionary cycle. But I think you just fold your arms, go through that process, and the economics will begin to take off again, and we will be just fine. And so I think those fundamentals exist, and I haven't seen many changes in that.
Awesome. No, I think that's, I personally am along the same lines, right? I mean, I get asked all the time, what is going to happen, right? Is there a crash coming? I mean, a lot of people, what they're doing is they're just looking at, say, housing prices. They see housing prices going up. And the last time they remember housing prices going up like this was 2006 to 2008, right? And so oftentimes I hear a lot of people say a crash is coming, a crash is coming. And the truth is a crash is always coming, right? I mean, we have a boom and bust economy. That's just how this economy operates. And you said it exactly right. It's generally, we see it in real estate about every 15 to 20 years, right in there. Now, I'm not saying that's a hard and fast rule. That's just what history has shown us over the last year. So completely agree. And on top of that, even in an inflationary period, it appears that the government and the people, the powers that be, are pretty set on trying to ensure that we don't go into another recession. So they can, the government has the ability to prop the economy up quite a bit if they really, really want to. And so, is there a recession going to happen? I'm kind of like you. Yes, there is. Is it in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? I don't really know, but I personally foresee things, continuing forward quite nicely for at least the next year or two. So
yeah,
great perspective.
I think they're gonna. Well, the Fed's announced they're going to have 3 rate increases this year. I expect that they're going to continue to do that over a period of time until we start to see inflation come back to a level of 2 to 3%, which is more in line with where they want to see consistent growth occurring. So we're going to see some changes. Cost of capital is going to be a little bit more, but I still think the fundamentals of the real estate market are solid if you're being careful on the types of investments that you're getting into.
Awesome. Well, I love it. So, you just mentioned types of investments. So what type of investments is Ken Holman personally interested in right now?
Well, so Mike, I think we've tried to differentiate ourselves from a lot of the other real estate developers out there. There are people that just focus on self-storage, people that just focus on apartments or retail properties or different aspects. And every one of those types of investments are favorable to a specific investment mantra or way they view the market. Mm-hmm. But we've taken this mixed use approach. First, I like development. Will Rogers said years ago, invest in land, they ain't making any more of it. and so I feel like for us, investing in land is a good play, as long as we can put fundamental projects into our investment model that I think makes sense. And the ones that seem to make sense today, always apartments, that seems to be a good base on every investment that we do. And then to sprinkle that on a like a horizontal mixed use, they have vertical mixed use projects. I'm not as excited about those as I am the horizontal mixed use, which means you take a segment of the land and you develop that into apartments. And then you take the commercial aspect of the land and you put in things like retail pads and medical office buildings. And we've even now started to look at some hotels. And I'm surprised to say this because a couple of years ago, I thought this pandemic, nobody's moving, travel is terrible. And I read several articles that said you're not going to see the hotel business get back for until 2024. And I have been extremely surprised at how fast the hotel business has rebounded.
Agreed.
And so we've decided that that segment of the market is stronger than we originally gave it credit for. And so we are in a couple of our projects investing in hotels. And frankly, those are the kinds of things that cities really like to see. They never like to see apartments for some reason. And yet that's the thing that drives everything else. But they love to see some retail. They love to see medical office. They love to see hotels. That's what gets it exciting. So we kind of use that as an entree to get these bigger developments done. And I really like the model that we've established that way.
I love it. And obviously I agree, right? I'm very much a part of what we're doing in the development company. That's actually a lot of what I do. And I completely agree. I'm really excited about the mixed use concept. And one of the things that I love that we've been able to do is leverage that 40 years of experience, right? Where you have absolutely developed almost everything that you can develop. And we can take that experience and make that something that is pretty unique to what we're doing. So I love that you mentioned that. Now, one of the things that you mentioned early on, and the second you said it, I knew I had to ask about it before we ended here. So you mentioned one of your first developments was Quail Cove Apartments in Layton, Utah, and it was 400 units, and your partner was GE Capital.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that being one of your first developments, correct?
Yes.
How on planet Earth was one of your first developments a 400 unit apartment complex partnering with GE Capital?
Well, there are words that I would probably like to use describing my courageous approach to and philosophy of life that I won't use here. But I have not been afraid over my career of tackling something that I haven't done before, or that's bigger than I would, than most people would look at and say they will do. If it makes sense, if you've got a feasibility study, and back in those days, there weren't that many companies doing feasibility studies, so we did our own. But if it looked like the demand exceeded the supply, and we always do that on every deal we do anyway, but if the demand exceeds the supply, if it's bigger than most are comfortable with, I'm sort of a big picture guy. I haven't mind tackling a deal like that. And that isn't the biggest project I've done, by the way. I've done another one, Holly Ridge in Gresham, Oregon, that was 440 units. And both turned out to be extremely successful. And doing some of these bigger deals, that's what attracts bigger investors. Your big investors, unless you're over 10 million and going closer to 50 or 75 million, they just don't want to deal with it because they want to put this capital to work, and they don't want to do it on 50 little deals. So when I said I was doing a 420 deal and approached GE Capital with that, it was like, that's right in our wheelhouse. We'll do that deal.
So I have a question with that then. So you'd never done a deal with GE Capital prior to that, correct?
I had not.
So how did you actually get a hold of GE Capital? I mean, I personally have done this, and people have heard me say this, right? I have cold called the likes of Goldman Sachs and and Blackstone, right? And I not to much success. I mean, things lead to other things, and I learned a lot. So, I mean, what did you do? Did you just call up the receptionist at GE Capital and say, hey, I got a 400 unit deal. Who do I talk to about getting tens of millions of dollars, right? How did that transpire?
Mike, they will not talk to you and they will not talk to me. So the way those deals get done is all through relationships. Like your podcast that you do, you're building relationships, you're establishing a network. Same thing with GE Capital. I went to somebody, it happened that one of my investors on that project was a guy that lived in Morristown, New Jersey. He was the president of a big company. You would recognize the name if I told you what it was. And he introduced me to another friend of his that he was in a Bible study class with, that was a principal in that company. And it's amazing how those relationships start and develop. But it really is who you know. And the more you can establish those relationships, the better off you are. And I can say that I think you've done a better job developing those relationships than I have. I should have done more of that. And we could have been farther along this path than we are today. But anyway, yeah.
No, those are for anybody who's listening to this podcast. And I feel like I say this every single time I interview someone, but I truly, truly mean it. Go back and you should just listen to the last 5-10 minutes where Ken talks about relationships, because I cannot place the amount of importance on building and establishing relationships and a solid network. I mean, you have it right here, right? Ken Holman, who on one of his first development deals goes out and does 400 units and gets GE Capital as a partner, right? And it was done solely through the relationships that he had. So that is just absolutely a golden nugget to take out of this segment. So I love that. Okay.
That's true.
We have got to start wrapping things up. So there's 2 questions we ask every single guest. And guess what? Even if you're my father, you still get asked the same questions. And so we're going to roll right into those right now. All right.
Does that mean I have to answer them?
Yes, you do. No free passes here. All right. Question number 1. What is the best business advice you were ever given?
Oh, gosh. I'm probably a little embarrassed to say this, but I don't remember having just a mentor that set me down and said, okay, this is how you should do it, or these are the things you should watch out for, and here's how you should develop your company. I didn't really have those mentoring experiences because I was sort of a pioneer. My dad was a rural mail carrier in Idaho, and loved him, and he worked hard, and he had 2 jobs and all of that stuff. But growing up, I really didn't have anybody that kind of taught me about business. And so I've learned it all through the School of Hard Knocks. I guess when I went to law school, shortly after, a movie came out called Paper Chase. And there was an actor in that movie. His name was John Houseman, an old crusty guy who was the professor that everybody hated but loved because he was the hardest guy that they'd ever had to take a class from. Anyway, he came out and did a series of advertisements for Stanley Morgan, which now is I guess it was Smith Barney back then. Now it's become Morgan Stanley is where they're at. But he did an advertisement for them, and he used these words. He said, how does Smith Barney make money? They make money the old-fashioned way. They earn it. And I think that's been a model for us. over the years. We just roll up our sleeves. We will go out and do the work to find the right properties. And when you've got a good property. And then you work hard at creating the right investment for that property. And that's kind of the model that we've used. And I didn't get that business advice from anybody else, which I am sad to say, but that's the advice I would give everybody.
Love it. No, I think that's fantastic. And definitely pertinent, right? I mean, in a lot of ways we've seen, and I've seen this especially in real estate, right? Where it's kind of been easy money a little bit, I'll say, right? It's easy come, easy go a little bit. And people have been able to make bad deals and have the market save them, right? I mean, you mentioned rents going up 20%. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter what deal you were in before that. If rents just went up 20%, your deal now works, right? And there's a lot of people I think that have been saved because of the market. And so being able to have those fundamentals, being able to really hone in and earn the money. I like that. Earn the money, I think is really important, especially now, even while everybody else, it feels like, money's just sort of freely flowing at the time. So I love that. All right. Next question. What real estate investing advice would you give other business owners or other business executives?
This is going to come as a surprise. Maybe not as a surprise for me, but as a surprise. Most financial planners and stockbrokers, whenever you ask them about investing in real estate, they'll direct you to a real estate investment trust, a REIT. And they will caution, never put more than 15% of your assets in real estate, and never more than 5% or 1/3 of that 15% in any one asset. I think that's a bunch of caca. From my perspective, if you don't have at least 50% of your investment portfolio in income producing real estate assets, you're making a huge mistake. I have found I probably have 95% of my portfolio in real estate, but I can tell you this, income producing real estate should be the bedrock of everything you do when you're investing. And if you have 50% of that, you can invest in other types of things and be okay, but you need to have a solid foundation. And to me, that solid foundation is good fundamental income producing real estate assets. That will carry you further than anything else you do.
Love it. And I completely agree. So as we kind of wrap up, Ken, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Probably just to get on our website, Overland Group, Inc. All of our contact, all of my contact information is on there. You can reach me by sending me an email at kholman@overlandcorp.com or give me a call. I'm probably one of the few that'll put out my phone number, but 801-231-6650. And yes, I still answer my phone.
I love it. I love it. Well, Ken, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. Ready to learn more? Go to executivereishow.com for more episodes and resources to help you create generational wealth through real estate investing. That's executivereishow.com.